The evening sky was painting itself orange and purple when old George heard something strange. A soft knock, so gentle he almost missed it over the sound of his television. He lived alone on his cattle ranch in Montana, miles away from the nearest town. Visitors were rare, especially after sunset. George pushed himself up from his worn leather chair and walked to the front door. His joints ached a bit. At 62, everything took a little more effort than it used to. He turned on the porch light and opened the door. What he saw made his heart drop. A young girl stood there, maybe 15 or 16 years old. Her face was a mess of bruises, purple and yellow marks that looked days old. Her lip was split and swollen. The jacket she wore was 3 sizes too big and torn at the shoulder. Her jeans had holes that weren't the fashionable kind. They were ripped from wear and rough travel, but it was her eyes that hit George the hardest. They were wide with fear, darting around like a trapped animal looking for escape routes. Yet there was something else there too. A tiny spark of hope desperately hanging on. The girl swayed slightly on her feet. She was exhausted. "Please," she whispered, her voice hoarse and broken. "They hurt me. They hurt me because of my size." George opened his mouth to ask what she meant, but before any words could come out, the girl's knees gave way. She started to crumble forward like a puppet with cut strings. George's old rancher reflexes kicked in. He lunged forward and caught her just before she hit the wooden porch floor. She was lighter than he expected, much lighter than she should be. Under all those baggy clothes, she was skin and bones. George could feel her ribs through the fabric. This child was starving. "Easy now, easy," George said softly, the same tone he used with spooked horses. He lifted her carefully, surprised at how little she weighed, and carried her inside. Her head rolled against his shoulder. She was barely conscious. George's living room was simple. A couch his late wife had picked out 10 years ago, a coffee table with old ranching magazines, and a television playing the evening news. He laid the girl down gently on the couch and grabbed the thick blanket from the back of it. She was shivering despite the warm evening. He covered her up and rushed to the kitchen. His hands shook slightly as he filled a glass with water. What should he do? Call the sheriff? An ambulance? But something in the way she'd looked at him, the way she'd whispered her plea, made him pause. She was running from something. Or someone. George came back and knelt beside the couch. "Hey there," he said gently. "Can you hear me? You need to drink some water." The girl's eyes fluttered open. They were hazel, he noticed. Pretty eyes that had seen too much pain for someone so young. She looked at him with confusion at first, then fear flooded back. "It's okay," George said quickly, holding up his hands. "You're safe here. Nobody's going to hurt you. I promise." She stared at him for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether to trust him. Finally, she gave a tiny nod. George helped her sit up a bit and brought the glass to her lips. She drank desperately, water spilling down her chin. When she finished, she started coughing. Slow down," George said, patting her back.
"When did you last eat?"
The girl looked down at her hands. They were dirty, with cuts and scrapes across the knuckles. "I don't know," she whispered. "Maybe 2 days. I found some bread in a gas station dumpster yesterday morning." George felt anger rise in his chest, not at her, but at whoever had let a child get to this state. "I'm going to make you something to eat. Something easy on your stomach. You stay right here and rest." He went to the kitchen and scrambled some eggs, made toast with butter, and heated up some chicken soup from a can. Nothing fancy, but warm and filling. As he cooked, his mind raced. Who was this girl? Where had she come from? And what did she mean when she said they hurt her because of her size? When he brought the food back on a tray, her eyes went wide. She sat up straighter, and for the first time he saw something other than fear in her expression. Hunger. Raw, desperate hunger. "Go ahead," George said, setting the tray on her lap. "Eat as much as you want." She grabbed the fork with trembling hands and started eating. Not like a person, but like someone who didn't know when their next meal would come. She shoveled the eggs into her mouth, barely chewing. George had to stop her. "Slow down, honey. I know you're hungry, but if you eat too fast, you'll get sick. The food's not going anywhere. I promise." Tears started running down her bruised face. She put down the fork and covered her mouth with her hand. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs. George felt his own eyes getting wet. He pulled over a chair and sat down near her, but not too close. He didn't want to scare her. "It's all right," he said softly. "You cry if you need to. Sometimes that's what helps." They sat like that for a while, her crying quietly, him waiting patiently. Outside, the last light of day faded away, and the ranch settled into nighttime sounds. Crickets chirped. Cattle lowed in the distance. The old house creaked in its familiar way. Finally, the girl wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her oversized jacket. She picked up the fork again and started eating more slowly this time. George watched as she finished every last bite, then drank another full glass of water. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice still rough but a bit stronger. "You're welcome," George said. "Now I need to ask you some things. But first, do you want to clean up? I can show you the bathroom. There are clean towels, and I think I can find some clothes that might fit better than what you're wearing." She nodded. George showed her to the bathroom down the hall. He found an old t-shirt and some sweatpants with a drawstring that his son had left behind years ago. They'd be big on her, but better than the torn clothes she had on. He left them outside the bathroom door. While she showered, George stood in his living room, phone in his hand. He should call someone. The sheriff, child services, someone. But something stopped him, that look in her eyes, the way she'd begged. The bruises that told a story of violence. He decided to wait. At least until morning. At least until he heard her story. Then he'd figure out what to do. The water shut off. A few minutes later, the bathroom door opened and the girl emerged. Her hair was wet and combed back. Her face was clean, making the bruises stand out even more. The clothes hung off her thin frame, but she looked more comfortable. "Feel better?" George asked. She nodded and gave him a small, shy smile. It was the first smile he'd seen from her. "Good," George said. "Now why don't you sit back down, and when you're ready, you can tell me what happened. Tell me why you knocked on my door tonight." The girl sat on the couch and pulled the blanket around her shoulders. She took a deep breath, and then in a quiet voice she began to tell him her story. 3 days had passed since that knock on the door. The girl, who said her name was Lily, was still at the ranch. George had set her up in the guest bedroom, the one that used to belong to his daughter before she grew up and moved to the city. Each day, Lily seemed a little less scared, a little more willing to talk. She didn't tell him everything at once. The story came out in pieces like a puzzle scattered across a table. Sometimes during breakfast. Sometimes while they sat on the porch in the evening. Sometimes in the middle of the night when George heard her crying and brought her warm milk. Lily had been living in a group home for teenagers. Not a foster home with a family, but a big house run by the state where kids who had nowhere else to go lived together. She'd been there for almost a year. "The other kids," Lily said one morning while picking at her pancakes, "they started making fun of me from the first day. They called me names: fat, ugly, cow, pig. Every meal was like a nightmare." George listened, his jaw tight. He'd seen bullying before, but something about hearing it from this thin, fragile girl made his blood boil. "But I'm not even that big," Lily continued, her voice small. "I mean, I'm not skinny, but I'm just normal. Maybe a little heavier than some girls, but not like they made it sound. They acted like I was some kind of monster." She pulled her sleeves down over her hands, a nervous habit George had noticed. They'd throw food at me in the dining room, moo at me when I walked by. Once they locked me in the bathroom and wouldn't let me out for hours. They took pictures and posted them online with horrible captions. George set down his coffee cup. "What about the adults? The people running the place?" Lily's laugh was bitter, way too bitter for a 16-year-old. Mrs. Chen, the director, she'd tell them to stop, but she never really did anything. The counselors would say kids will be kids, like that made it okay. Nobody ever got in trouble. Nobody ever got punished. Over the next few days, more of the story came out. The bullying got worse. One girl in particular, someone Lily called the Queen Bee, made it her personal mission to make Lily's life miserable. She'd trip Lily in the hallways. She'd steal her clothes and hide them. She'd start rumors that everyone believed. "I tried to ignore it," Lily said, tears streaming down her face as she sat on the porch swing. "I tried to be invisible. I stopped eating in the dining room. I'd sneak food to my room late at night. But that just made them call me a pig even more." The turning point came 3 weeks ago. Lily had been in her room, reading a book someone had donated to the home. The Queen Bee and her friends burst in. They grabbed Lily's journal, the one place where she wrote down all her thoughts and feelings. They read it out loud, Lily whispered, her voice shaking with the memory. "All my private thoughts. All the things I was too scared to say out loud." They laughed at everything. At how I missed my mom. At how I wished I was pretty. At how lonely I felt. George reached over and patted her hand gently. That wasn't right. That was cruel. It got worse, Lily continued. They started posting pages from my journal online. Kids from school saw it. Everyone saw it. I couldn't go anywhere without people laughing at me. Then came the night that changed everything. Lily had confronted the queen bee, begging her to take down the posts. The argument got heated. The other girl pushed Lily. Lily pushed back. Before she knew it, 5 other kids had jumped in. They held her down and beat her, punched her face, kicked her ribs, pulled her hair. I screamed for help, Lily said, touching the fading bruise on her cheek. The counselor on duty that night finally came. But you know what happened? They all lied. They said I started it. They said I attacked first, and Mrs. Chen believed them over me. George shook his head in disgust. So you ran? I had to, Lily said. The next morning, I packed a bag with whatever clothes I could fit. I took the $40 I'd saved from doing chores, and I climbed out my window before anyone woke up. She'd walked to the highway and started hitchhiking. Some people were kind and gave her rides. Others scared her, and she'd jump out at the next stop. She ate whatever she could find. Vending machine snacks she bought with her dwindling money. Leftovers from restaurant dumpsters. Once, a truck driver bought her a burger at a rest stop. I didn't have a plan, Lily admitted. I just knew I couldn't go back there. I'd rather die than go back. She'd been on the road for almost 3 weeks, sleeping in bus stations, hiding from police, getting hungrier and more desperate each day. Then one evening, as the sun was setting, she'd seen George's ranch in the distance. The lights looked warm, welcoming, like a home was supposed to look. I almost didn't knock, Lily said. I thought maybe you'd be mean too, or you'd call the cops right away, but I was so tired and so hungry, I couldn't walk anymore. So I knocked and you answered and you didn't turn me away. George felt a lump in his throat. He thought about his own daughter, safe in her apartment in Denver with a good job and good friends. What if she'd been in Lily's situation? What if someone had hurt her and nobody believed her? You did the right thing knocking on my door, George said firmly. And I'm glad you did. But now came the hard part. George had to make some decisions. He'd already called the local sheriff, his old friend Mike. Mike had come by, listened to Lily's story, and agreed to hold off on making any official reports for a few days. He'd started making some quiet phone calls to find out more about the group home. George's daughter, Beth, who was a lawyer, had also gotten involved. She'd taken time off work to come visit. She sat with Lily for hours, taking detailed notes about everything that had happened. She photographed the bruises that were still visible. She started building a case. This is serious abuse, Beth told her father privately. That facility needs to be investigated. And Lily needs proper placement, but where? That was the question. Lily couldn't go back to the group home. That much was clear. But the foster system was overcrowded. Finding a good placement could take months. In the meantime, where would she go? George looked at the girl sitting on his porch swing, finally eating properly, finally sleeping without nightmares every night. He looked at his big, empty house. He looked at the ranch that had felt so lonely since his wife passed away. Maybe, just maybe, there was a solution right here. Beth, George said to his daughter, what would it take for Lily to stay here? With me? At least temporarily? Beth looked at her father with surprise, then slowly smiled. Let me look into it, Dad. Let me see what we can do. That evening, as the sun set over the ranch, George and Lily sat together on the porch. The cattle were settling down for the night. A cool breeze carried the smell of grass and earth. For the first time in weeks, Lily looked peaceful. George? She said softly. Yeah? Thank you for believing me. George smiled. Always. George's ranch had been quiet for 2 years. Too quiet. After his wife, Helen, passed away from cancer, the house felt bigger and emptier than ever. His son lived in Seattle with his own family. His daughter, Beth, visited when she could, but her law practice kept her busy in Denver. Most days, George's only companions were his cattle, his old dog Bruno, and the memories that filled every corner of the house. Now, suddenly, there was noise again. The shower running in the morning. Footsteps down the hallway. Someone else's coffee cup in the sink. At first, George wasn't sure how he felt about it. He'd gotten used to his routines, his silence, his solitary life. But watching Lily slowly come back to life, well, that changed something in him. The legal situation was complicated. Beth had explained it to him over the phone using words like temporary custody and emergency placement and background checks. There would be paperwork. Lots of it. Social workers would need to visit. George would need to take classes. The system had rules and they'd have to follow them. But Dad, Beth had said, her voice warm with pride, if you really want to do this, I'll help you every step of the way. And honestly, I think it's wonderful. While they waited for the bureaucracy to sort itself out, Lily stayed in the guest room. At first, she barely came out except for meals. She was still scared, still waiting for something bad to happen. George understood. Trust took time, especially when it had been broken so badly. He didn't push her. He just went about his daily routine and let her adjust at her own pace. One morning, about a week after she'd arrived, George was making breakfast when Lily appeared in the kitchen doorway. She was wearing the clean clothes Beth had brought over, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. "Can I help?" she asked quietly. George looked up from the eggs he was scrambling. "Sure, you know how to make toast?" She nodded and moved to the toaster. They worked in comfortable silence, and when they sat down to eat, something felt different. Less tense. More natural. "This is a nice house," Lily said, looking around the kitchen with its old wooden cabinets and sunflower curtains. "It feels like a real home." "Helen, my wife, she's the one who made it feel that way," George said, smiling at the memory. "Me, I'm just good at fixing fences and feeding cattle. She was the one who made everything warm and cozy." "How long were you married?" 38 years. Met her at a county fair when we were both 19. Best decision I ever made, asking her to dance." Lily smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "That's sweet. My mom, she used to tell me stories about how she met my dad. He brought her flowers every Friday." "You miss her?" Lily's smile faded. "Every day. She died when I was 8. Car accident. After that, it was just foster homes and group homes. Nobody wanted to keep me long term." George felt his heart break a little more for this kid. "Well, you're welcome to stay here as long as the law allows. And who knows, maybe we can work something out more permanent." Her eyes went wide. "Really, you'd want that?" "I got a big empty house and no one to share it with. You need a safe place to be. Seems like it could work out for both of us." That conversation marked a turning point. Lily started joining George for more than just meals. She'd follow him out to the porch in the evenings where he'd sit and watch the sunset. She'd ask questions about the ranch, about the cattle, about his life. And George, who'd spent 2 years barely talking to anyone, found himself sharing stories he hadn't thought about in years. He told her about growing up on this very ranch, about learning to ride horses when he was 5, about his father teaching him that hard work and honesty were the only things that really mattered in life. He told her funny stories about Helen, like the time she tried to learn to rope cattle and accidentally lassoed him instead. Lily laughed, and the sound filled the house with something it had been missing. In return, Lily opened up more too. She talked about her mom, about the good memories before the accident. She loved reading and had dreams of maybe becoming a teacher someday. She was scared of dogs at first, but Bruno, with his gentle nature, quickly won her over. Within days, she was sitting on the floor petting him while watching television. "I've never had a pet," she said one evening, scratching Bruno behind his ears. "The group home didn't allow them." "Well, Bruno's adopted you now," George said. "Once he decides he loves someone, that's it. You're stuck with him." Lily buried her face in Bruno's fur and George saw her shoulders shake. He pretended not to notice, giving her privacy for her tears. Bruno just sat there patiently, as if he understood exactly what she needed. Slowly, day by day, Lily became more comfortable. She started eating regular meals without that desperate hungry look. Her bruises faded from purple to yellow to gone. She gained a little weight, looking healthier and stronger. The fear in her eyes dimmed, replaced by cautious hope. But she was still healing inside. George could see it in the way she startled at sudden noises, in the way she'd apologize constantly for the smallest things, in the nightmares that still woke her up some nights. One night around 2 in the morning, George woke to the sound of crying. He got up and padded down the hall to find Lily sitting on the floor outside her room, hugging her knees, tears streaming down her face. "Hey," he said softly, sitting down beside her. "Bad dream?" She nodded, unable to speak. "Want to talk about it?" "They were chasing me," she whispered. "All of them. From the group home. And nobody would help me. Everyone just watched and laughed." George put his arm around her shoulders and she leaned into him like a child seeking comfort from a parent. "You're safe here, Lily. I promise you're safe. Nobody's going to hurt you anymore. But what if they find me? What if they make me go back? They won't. Beth's making sure of that. We're all making sure of that. You're not alone anymore. They sat there on the hallway floor until Lily's tears stopped and her breathing evened out. George made her some chamomile tea, and they sat at the kitchen table talking about nothing important until the sun started to rise. The next morning, something had shifted again. At breakfast, Lily looked at George with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Thank you," she said, "for last night. For everything. I don't know why you're being so nice to me, but thank you." George set down his coffee cup and looked at her seriously. "You know, after Helen died, this place felt dead too. I was just going through the motions. Wake up, work, sleep, repeat. But having you here, it's reminded me what it feels like to have purpose again, to have someone to care about. So really, you're helping me just as much as I'm helping you." Lily's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were different. Not tears of pain or fear, but something else, gratitude, relief, maybe even the beginning of happiness. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Anything." The group home, they used to say nobody would want me because I was difficult, because I was too much trouble. Do you think I'm too much trouble? George reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Lily, you're not trouble at all. You're a good kid who got dealt a bad hand. That's not your fault. And anyone who made you feel like you were the problem, well, they were wrong. Dead wrong." She smiled through her tears. "I was thinking maybe I could help out more around here. Like with chores and stuff. I want to earn my keep." "This isn't a transaction," George said gently. "But if you want to help out, I won't say no. Fair warning, though, ranch work is hard." "I'm tougher than I look," Lily said, sitting up straighter. George grinned. "I believe you. All right, then. Tomorrow we start. I'll teach you everything I know." That night, as George lay in bed, he thought about how strange life was. A month ago, he'd been alone, moving through his days like a ghost in his own house. Now he had a purpose again. Someone who needed him. Someone who was bringing his home back to life. He thought Helen would approve. She'd always had a soft spot for kids who needed help. She'd volunteered at the local school, always baking extra cookies for the kids who came from homes where there wasn't much to eat. She would have loved Lily. Maybe, George thought as he drifted off to sleep. Maybe this was Helen's doing somehow. Maybe she'd sent Lily to his door. It was a nice thought, and it made him smile in the darkness. The alarm went off at 5:30 in the morning. Lily groaned and pulled the pillow over her head. Back at the group home, she'd never had to wake up this early. But ranch life was different. George had warned her. She dragged herself out of bed and splashed cold water on her face. When she stumbled into the kitchen, George was already there pouring coffee. "Morning," he said cheerfully. "Ready for your first real day of ranch work?" Lily mumbled something that might have been yes and accepted the hot chocolate he offered. She'd told him she didn't like coffee, and he'd remembered. That small gesture made her smile despite the ungodly hour. After a quick breakfast, they headed outside. The morning air was cool and fresh, and the sky was just starting to lighten from black to deep blue. Stars were still visible overhead. Lily had never seen so many stars before. In the city, light pollution hid them. Here they covered the entire sky like diamonds scattered on velvet. "First lesson," George said, handing her a pair of work gloves. "These are your best friends. Blisters hurt something fierce, so wear these whenever we're working." He showed her how to feed the cattle, spreading hay in the feeding troughs. It looked easy when he did it, but when Lily tried to lift a hay bale, she could barely get it off the ground. "Use your legs, not your back," George instructed. "Bend at the knees, keep your back straight." There you go. It took Lily 3 tries to lift the bale properly, and even then she could only carry it a few feet before needing to set it down. Her arms shook with effort. "Don't worry," George said kindly. "You'll build up strength. Everyone starts somewhere." They worked for 2 hours before heading back for a proper breakfast. Lily was exhausted, sweaty, and her muscles already ached. But there was something satisfying about it. She'd done real work. She'd contributed something useful. Over the next few weeks, ranch work became routine. Wake up early, feed the cattle, muck out the stables, fix fences, haul supplies. Every task was physical and demanding. At first, Lily struggled with everything. Her soft hands blistered despite the gloves. Her muscles screamed in protest every morning. She couldn't keep up with George, who'd been doing this work his whole life. But slowly, gradually, she got stronger. The hay bales that seemed impossibly heavy on day 1 became manageable by week 2. By week 3, she could carry them without stopping. Her blistered hands toughened into calluses. Her arms developed actual muscles. She could work for hours without needing a break. The physical transformation wasn't the only change. The fresh air, the sunshine, the regular meals, they all combined to bring color back to her cheeks. She'd been so thin when she arrived, almost skeletal from weeks of not eating properly. Now she was gaining healthy weight. Her face filled out. Her clothes started to fit properly, but more importantly, she was smiling. Really smiling. George noticed everything and said nothing. He didn't comment on her appearance or her weight. He never made eating feel like a performance or a test. Meals were just fuel for the work they did together. Food was shared without judgment, without shame, without any of the toxic baggage she'd carried from the group home. One afternoon, they were fixing a broken fence post when Lily started laughing. Just sudden, genuine laughter. George looked up, surprised. "What's funny?" "I just realized," Lily said, wiping sweat from her forehead. "I haven't thought about those kids from the group home all day. Usually they're in my head constantly, all the mean things they said, all the ways they hurt me. But today I forgot about them completely." George smiled and handed her a water bottle. "That's good. That's real good. You're filling your head with better things now." "I like it here," Lily said softly. "I like the work. I like feeling useful. I like feeling strong." "You are strong," George said. "Stronger than you know." The ranch became Lily's therapy. When memories of the bullying crept in, she'd go outside and lose herself in physical work. When nightmares woke her up, she'd sit on the porch and listen to the cattle settle for the night until she felt calm again. When anxiety made her chest tight, she'd walk the property line with Bruno trotting beside her. One day, about a month after she'd arrived, something special happened. George introduced her to the barn cats. There were 3 of them, semi-wild creatures that kept the mice population under control. They tolerated George but usually kept their distance from people. The orange one, which George called Rusty, was the friendliest. Lily sat on an overturned bucket in the barn, reading a book while George worked on some equipment. She wasn't trying to interact with the cats. She was just there, existing quietly in their space. After about 20 minutes, Rusty emerged from behind a stack of hay bales. He watched Lily with suspicious green eyes. She deliberately ignored him, keeping her focus on her book. Slowly, cautiously, Rusty crept closer. He sniffed her boot, then her leg. Then, to her surprise, he jumped up into her lap. Lily froze, barely breathing. The cat circled once, twice, then settled down and started purring. His warm weight in her lap, the rumbling vibration of his purr, it filled Lily with an unexpected rush of emotion. This wild creature had chosen her, had trusted her. Tears streamed down her face, but she was smiling. George looked over and saw what was happening. He didn't say anything, just smiled and went back to work. But he understood. Sometimes healing came from the smallest moments. A cat choosing your lap, a sunrise you woke up early enough to see, the satisfaction of a hard day's work. That evening, Lily helped George cook dinner. They'd fallen into a routine of cooking together, him teaching her the simple ranch cooking Helen had taught him years ago. "Tonight was meatloaf and mashed potatoes, George," Lily said as she peeled potatoes. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure. Why are you doing all this, really?" "You could have just called the police that first night. You could have sent me back to the system, but you didn't. Why?" George was quiet for a moment, thinking about how to answer. "You know, after Helen died, I felt like I'd lost my purpose. Our kids were grown. The ranch practically runs itself. I was just existing, not really living. Then you knocked on my door, and suddenly I had a reason to get up in the morning again. Someone who needed me." He turned to look at her. "But it's more than that. When I looked at you that first night, scared and hurt and desperate, I saw my own daughter. I thought about what if she'd been in your situation? What if she'd needed help and the only person around was a stranger? I'd want that stranger to be kind, to help, to care. So that's what I'm doing." Lily set down the potato peeler and hugged him. Just a quick, spontaneous hug that surprised them both. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me as worth saving." George hugged her back, this girl who'd stumbled into his life and brought it back to color. "You were always worth saving, Lily, always." The weeks continued to pass. Spring turned to summer, and the ranch bloomed with wildflowers. Lily learned to drive the old truck around the property. She learned which cattle had which personalities. She learned to tell when a storm was coming by watching the sky. She learned 100 small skills that made her feel capable and competent. Her nightmares came less frequently. Her appetite was healthy and normal. Her laugh became a regular sound around the ranch. She started taking online classes to catch up on the schooling she'd missed, studying at the kitchen table in the evenings while George read his ranching magazines. One afternoon, they were sitting on the porch after a long day of work. Lily was scratching Rusty behind the ears while Bruno snoozed at their feet. The sun was setting in brilliant orange and pink. "I never want to leave here," Lily said quietly. "Is that weird?" "Not weird at all," George replied. "This is home. For both of us now." And in that moment, despite all the legal uncertainty ahead, despite not knowing what the future held, Lily felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt safe. She felt wanted. She felt like she belonged. The ranch had healed her in ways therapy never could. The hard work had made her strong. The fresh air had cleared her mind. The animals had taught her about trust and gentleness. And George, with his quiet kindness and steadfast support, had shown her that not all adults would hurt her. She was becoming who she was always meant to be. Not the broken, scared girl who'd knocked on that door weeks ago, but someone new, someone stronger, someone with hope. George had been working on something in secret. Well, not exactly secret, but he hadn't told Lily about it because he wanted it to be a surprise. For weeks he'd been making phone calls, arranging details, building something in the far barn that Lily rarely visited. One Saturday morning, after they'd finished the regular chores, George had a strange look on his face. Excited, maybe. A little nervous. "Come with me," he said. "I want to show you something." Lily followed him across the property to the old red barn. She'd been in there a few times. Mostly it was used for storage, filled with old equipment and tools. But as they got closer, she heard something unexpected. A sound she'd heard in movies but never in real life. The sound of a horse. Her heart started beating faster. George opened the barn door and there, in a newly renovated stall with fresh hay and clean water, stood the most beautiful horse Lily had ever seen. She was a bay mare with a dark mane and intelligent eyes, but she was pressed into the far corner of the stall, head low, body tense. "Her name is Moonlight," George said quietly. "She's a rescue. The people who had her before, they weren't kind. She's been through some rough treatment. Won't let anyone get close. The rescue organization was about to give up on her. Maybe put her down because they thought she was too dangerous to rehome." Lily stared at the horse and something clicked in her chest. She saw herself in those scared eyes. She saw the tension of waiting for the next hurt. She saw the walls built up to protect a wounded heart. "I thought maybe," George continued, "you two might understand each other. I know you've always wanted to be around horses. You mentioned it a few times. So I got her. She's ours now if we can help her heal. Can I go in?" Lily whispered. "Slow and careful. She spooks easy. And if she pins her ears back or starts showing teeth, you back out immediately. Understood?" Lily nodded and slowly opened the stall door. Moonlight's eyes went wide, showing white around the edges. Her ears flattened against her head. But she didn't charge or kick. She just trembled in her corner. "Hey there," Lily said softly, staying near the door. "Hey, beautiful girl. I'm not going to hurt you, I promise." She didn't try to approach. She just stood there, speaking in a gentle voice, letting the horse get used to her presence. After 5 minutes, George touched her shoulder. "That's enough for today. Let her settle in. You can try again tomorrow." Over the next few days, Lily spent hours at the barn. She'd sit on an overturned bucket outside Moonlight's stall and just talk. She told the horse about her day, about the book she was reading, about the funny thing Bruno did that morning. Sometimes she'd read aloud. Sometimes she'd just sit in comfortable silence. Moonlight watched her with suspicious eyes, but gradually stopped pressing herself into the corner. Her ears would flick forward, listening. Her body relaxed, just slightly. "You're doing good," George told Lily one evening. "Patience is the key with traumatized animals. Can't rush trust." Lily thought about her own trauma, her own slow healing process. "I get it," she said. "I really get it." After a week, Lily started sitting inside the stall, still keeping distance, still not trying to touch. She'd bring apples and set them on the ground halfway between herself and the horse. At first, Moonlight wouldn't touch them until Lily left. But gradually, day by day, she'd wait less time. Then she started eating them while Lily was still there. Then she started taking a few steps closer. 2 weeks in, Moonlight took an apple directly from Lily's flat palm. Her soft lips tickled Lily's hand and Lily laughed with pure joy. "Good girl," she whispered. "Such a good, brave girl." Moonlight watched her with suspicious eyes, but gradually stopped pressing herself into the corner. Her ears would flick forward, listening. Her body relaxed, just slightly. Moonlight's eyes went wide, showing white around the edges. Her ears flattened against her head. She just stood there, speaking in a gentle voice, letting the horse get used to her presence. After 5 minutes, George touched her shoulder. "That's enough for today. Let her settle in. You can try again tomorrow." Lily George watched from outside the stall, smiling. He saw what was happening. Two wounded souls helping each other heal. The girl teaching the horse that people could be kind. The horse teaching the girl about patience and trust. But progress wasn't always forward. One day, Lily wore a different jacket, a red one Beth had bought her. When she approached the stall, Moonlight panicked. She reared up, eyes rolling, making sounds of distress that broke Lily's heart. Lily immediately backed away and took off the jacket. "I'm sorry," she called to the horse. "I'm sorry. Look, it's just me. Same person." It took 3 days for Moonlight to trust her again. George explained that the previous owner probably wore red, and it triggered bad memories. "Trauma is like that," he said. "Can't always predict what will set it off." Lily understood that too. Sometimes a raised voice, even in laughter, would make her flinch. Sometimes a certain smell would trigger memories of the group home. Healing wasn't a straight line. She started wearing the same clothes when visiting Moonlight. Soft blues and greens. She moved slowly, predictably. She never raised her voice. She respected the horse's boundaries. A month into the process, Moonlight let Lily touch her neck. Just a brief touch, but it felt like a victory. Lily cried happy tears as her hand rested on the warm, silky coat. The horse's muscles twitched under her palm, but she didn't pull away. "You're amazing," Lily whispered. "You're so brave for trying again, for letting someone in." Each day brought small progress, a scratch behind the ears, a gentle brush through the mane. Lily learned to read Moonlight's body language, to know when she was relaxed and when she needed space. She learned which spots the mare loved having scratched and which made her nervous. George taught Lily the proper way to care for a horse. How to brush out the coat, how to clean hooves, how to check for injuries or signs of illness. Lily absorbed everything like a sponge, eager to learn, eager to give this horse the best care possible. "She's teaching me as much as I'm teaching her," Lily told George one evening. They were sitting on the porch watching the sunset. "She's showing me that healing takes time, that setbacks are normal, that trust has to be earned, not demanded." "And what are you teaching her?" George asked. Lily thought about it. "That not everyone will hurt her. That she's safe now. That she's allowed to take up space and have needs. That she's worthy of love." George smiled. "Sounds like lessons you both needed to learn." 6 weeks after Moonlight arrived, something incredible happened. Lily was in the stall, brushing the mare's side while humming softly. Without warning, Moonlight turned her head and gently rested her muzzle against Lily's chest. Just resting there, breathing, sharing space. Lily froze, hardly daring to breathe. Then slowly, carefully, she wrapped her arms around the horse's neck in a gentle hug. Moonlight didn't pull away. They stood like that for several minutes, two beings who understood pain, finding comfort in each other. When Lily finally stepped back, tears were streaming down her face, but she was smiling wider than George had ever seen. "She trusts me," Lily said in wonder. "She actually trusts me." "Of course she does," George said from where he'd been watching. "You showed her you were trustworthy. You were patient. You let her heal at her own pace." That evening, Lily could barely eat dinner. She was so excited. She talked nonstop about Moonlight, about the breakthrough, about her plans to continue working with her. "Do you think she'll ever be able to be ridden?" Lily asked. "Maybe," George said. "But that's not the goal right now. The goal is just helping her feel safe and happy. If riding comes later, great. If not, she's still got a good home here for the rest of her life." Lily nodded, understanding the wisdom in that. Not everything had to have a purpose or end goal. Sometimes being was enough. Existing in safety and comfort was enough. Over the following weeks, the bond between girl and horse grew stronger. Moonlight started nickering when she heard Lily's voice. She'd come to the stall door looking for treats and attention. Her coat became shinier, her eyes brighter. She was transforming just like Lily had. George would watch them together and marvel at the healing power of connection. Both of them had been hurt by the world. Both had been told they were too difficult, too damaged, not worth the effort. Both had proven those judgments wrong. One day, Lily led Moonlight out of the stall for the first time. Just into the small paddock attached to the barn, but it was progress. The mare followed on the lead rope, ears forward, trusting. They walked together in the sunshine, and Lily felt her heart might burst with happiness. This horse had given her purpose beyond just ranch chores. Caring for Moonlight, earning her trust, watching her heal, it gave Lily something precious. It showed her that she was capable of helping another living being, that she had patience and kindness to offer. that she could make a real difference, and Moonlight had given her something else too. A mirror. In the horse's journey from fear to trust, Lily saw her own journey. She saw how far she'd come from that scared, hurt girl who'd knocked on George's door. She saw her own strength, her own resilience, her own capacity for healing. "Thank you," Lily told George that night, "for bringing her here, for giving me this chance." "Thank you," George replied, "for showing me that broken things can be fixed with time and love. Both of you taught me that." They stood together on the porch, watching the stars come out, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling for the night. From the barn came a soft nicker. Moonlight calling goodnight. Lily smiled and called back softly, "Good night, beautiful girl. See you in the morning." And she would, tomorrow and the day after and all the days to come, because they'd found each other, these two wounded souls. And together they were learning what it meant to heal. 3 months had passed since Lily knocked on George's door. 3 months of healing, of growing stronger, of building a new life. She'd almost started to believe that maybe, just maybe, the past could stay in the past. Then one Tuesday afternoon, everything changed. George and Lily were in the kitchen making lunch when they heard a car coming up the long driveway. They got visitors occasionally. Beth checking in, the sheriff stopping by, neighbors dropping off baked goods. But this car was different, a dark sedan that kicked up dust as it approached. George looked out the window and his face went serious. "Lily, go to your room for a minute." "Why? Who is it?" "Just do as I say. Please." The tone of his voice scared her. Lily hurried down the hall but left her door cracked open so she could hear. Her heart was pounding. She had a bad feeling about this. She heard the front door open. Heard George's voice, polite but cold. "Can I help you?" Then another voice. A woman's voice that made Lily's blood run cold. "Mrs. Chen, the director of the group home." "Mr. Walker, I'm Angela Chen from Riverside Youth Home. I believe you have one of our residents here, a girl named Lily Peterson. I've come to take her back." Lily pressed her hand over her mouth to keep from making a sound. Her whole body started shaking. "Not back there. Please, not back there." George's voice was firm. "She's not going anywhere with you. Mr. Walker, I understand you've been kind to house her temporarily, but Lily is under state custody. She ran away from our facility. We have a legal obligation to return her to our care." "Your care?" George's voice rose slightly. "Is that what you call it? Care? Where she was beaten and bullied and nobody protected her?" "I don't know what stories she's told you, but teenagers can be dramatic. Lily had some difficulties adjusting. To group living, that's true, but our facility is state certified and perfectly safe." Lily couldn't stay quiet anymore. She emerged from her room and walked down the hallway. George saw her and shook his head, trying to tell her to stay back, but she kept coming. She needed to face this. Mrs. Chen turned and saw her. "Lily. Oh, honey, we've been so worried about you. Come on, let's get you home." "That place was never my home," Lily said, her voice trembling but clear. "And I'm not going back." Mrs. Chen's smile was thin and fake. "Sweetie, you don't have a choice. You're a minor in state custody. Mr. Walker here has no legal right to keep you." "Tell her," Lily said to George. "Tell her about the lawyer." George nodded and crossed his arms. "My daughter is a lawyer. She's been working with the courts. We've documented everything that happened to Lily at your facility. The abuse, the neglect, the complete failure of your staff to protect her." Mrs. Chen's face went pale. "Those are serious accusations." "They're not accusations," George said. "They're facts. We have photos of her injuries, written statements, medical reports, and we're prepared to go public with all of it if you don't leave this property right now." "You can't threaten me," Mrs. Chen said, but her voice wavered. "It's not a threat," George replied. "It's a promise. Now get off my land." Mrs. Chen looked between them, her expression hardening. "This isn't over. The state will send someone official. You can't just keep her." "We'll deal with that when it happens," George said. "Now leave." After Mrs. Chen's car disappeared down the driveway, George pulled Lily into a tight hug. She was shaking so hard she could barely stand. "It's okay," he murmured. "She can't take you. I won't let her." But Lily couldn't stop crying. All the fear she'd been pushing down came flooding back. What if they forced her to return? What if she lost this safe place she'd found? George called Beth immediately. She listened to what happened and swore under her breath. Okay, this moves up our timeline. I've been gathering evidence, but I need to file the formal complaints now. Dad, I need you to write down everything that just happened. Exact words if you can remember. And Lily, honey, I know this is hard, but I need you to write a detailed statement about everything that happened at that group home. Every incident. Every time they hurt you. Every time staff ignored you. Can you do that? Lily wiped her eyes. Yes, I can do it. Over the next few days, Lily wrote, page after page of painful memories. Every cruel name she'd been called. Every time they'd thrown food at her. Every bruise, every tear, every moment of fear. It was like living through it all again, and some nights she couldn't sleep. But George was there, and Moonlight was there. And somehow, she found the strength to keep going. Beth filed formal complaints with the state licensing board. She sent documentation to Child Protective Services. She contacted a journalist friend who specialized in investigating child welfare failures. She built a case that couldn't be ignored. 2 weeks after Mrs. Chen's visit, 2 social workers arrived at the ranch. Unlike Mrs. Chen, they seemed genuinely concerned. They interviewed Lily privately, asking detailed questions about her time at the group home and her current living situation with George. Are you happy here? One of them asked, a kind-faced woman with gray hair. Yes, Lily said without hesitation. This is the first place I've felt safe in years. And Mr. Walker treats you well? He treats me like family. He's teaching me about the ranch. He got me a horse. He makes sure I eat well and do my schoolwork. He's never once made me feel bad about myself. The social workers inspected the house, the property, Lily's room. They spoke with George at length. They contacted Beth and reviewed all the documentation. Then they did something unexpected. They started investigating the group home. Other kids came forward. Kids who'd witnessed what happened to Lily. Kids who'd experienced similar abuse themselves. Staff members who'd tried to report problems but were ignored or threatened into silence. The case grew bigger than anyone had expected. A month later, the local news ran a story. State group home under investigation for abuse and neglect. Lily watched the broadcast with George and Beth. Her hands were shaking as she saw her story, told anonymously, become public. She saw Mrs. Chen refusing to comment. She saw other parents and advocates calling for accountability. You did this, Beth said, squeezing Lily's shoulder. Your courage to come forward started all of this. You're helping other kids by telling your truth. That was a strange feeling. For so long, Lily had felt powerless, weak, someone things happened to. But now, by speaking up, she'd become someone who made things happen. Someone who fought back. Someone who protected others. The investigation concluded 6 weeks later. The group home was shut down pending major reforms. Mrs. Chen was fired. Several staff members faced disciplinary action. Kids were moved to better facilities with better oversight. The story made state news, and legislators started talking about reforms to the foster care system. Through it all, George and Beth fought to keep Lily with them. The legal process was complicated and slow. There were court dates and paperwork and home inspections. But gradually, they made progress. The judge assigned to Lily's case was a woman who'd spent 30 years working in family law. She'd seen every kind of situation. When she interviewed Lily in her chambers, she asked tough questions. Why do you want to stay with Mr. Walker? You've only known him a few months. Lily thought carefully before answering. Because he sees me, not what happened to me, not my trauma or my past. He sees who I actually am and who I can become. He's given me space to heal and grow. He's never once made me feel like a burden or a problem to solve. He just lets me be. The judge nodded slowly. And what do you want for your future? I want to finish high school. I want to keep working with Moonlight and maybe work with other rescue horses. I want to help other kids who've been through what I went through. And I want to do all that while living on the ranch with George, if the law allows it. A week later, the judge issued her decision. George was granted temporary custody with a path toward permanent guardianship. There would be regular check-ins and reviews, but as long as everything remained stable, Lily could stay. When Beth called with the news, Lily cried, but this time they were tears of relief and joy. George hugged her tight and said, "Welcome home, kiddo, for real this time." That evening, they celebrated with a special dinner. Beth drove up from Denver to join them. They ate together, laughing and talking about the future. For the first time in her life, Lily had a future to plan for, a future that felt secure and full of possibility. Later, Lily went to visit Moonlight. She stood in the stall, brushing the mare's coat and talking softly. "We did it, girl. We're safe now, both of us. Nobody's taking us away from here." Moonlight nickered softly and nuzzled Lily's shoulder. They stood together in the quiet barn. Two survivors who'd found their place in the world. Two beings who'd been hurt, but refused to stay broken. George watched from the barn door, his heart full. He'd lost his wife and the grief had nearly consumed him. But somehow, through helping Lily, he'd found his way back to living. She'd saved him as much as he'd saved her. "Thank you, Helen," he whispered to the evening air. "Thank you for sending her to me." And maybe it was just the wind, or maybe it was something more, but George could have sworn he felt a gentle touch on his shoulder, a reminder that love never really leaves. It just changes form and finds new ways to show up when we need it most. The temporary custody arrangement had been in place for 6 months now. Life on the ranch had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Lily woke early, helped with chores, spent time with Moonlight, did her online schoolwork, and had dinner with George every evening. It felt normal. It felt right. But in the back of her mind, she knew temporary meant temporary. The question was, what came next? One evening in late fall, Beth drove up for dinner. She'd been making the trip from Denver more often lately. She and Lily had grown close. Beth had become like the big sister Lily never had, someone to talk to about things that were hard to say to George. Girl stuff, future stuff, dream stuff. After dinner, Beth pulled out a folder of papers. "Okay, we need to talk about something important." Lily's stomach tightened. She hated when conversations started like that. Usually it meant bad news. George sat down at the table and Lily joined them. Beth looked at both of them seriously. "The temporary custody is working great. The social workers' reports have all been positive. Lily's thriving here. But temporary can't last forever. We need to work towards something more permanent." "Like what?" Lily asked quietly. "Like permanent guardianship. Or even adoption eventually. The thing is, it's complicated. George is a single man in his 60s with no prior fostering experience. That's not typical for these situations." "But I don't care about typical," Lily said. "I want to stay here. I know, sweetheart. And we're going to make that happen. But we need to build an even stronger case. We need to show that this isn't just a temporary arrangement, but a real stable family situation." Over the next few weeks, they worked on exactly that. Beth helped George get certified as a foster parent, which meant taking classes and completing training. At 62, George was the oldest person in his certification class by at least 20 years. But he sat through every session, took notes, and passed every requirement. Lily had to go through evaluations too. A psychologist met with her several times to assess her mental health and well-being. At first, Lily was nervous. What if the psychologist said she was too damaged, too messed up? What if they used her trauma as a reason to take her away? But Dr. Martinez was different. She didn't treat Lily like a case file. She treated her like a person. "Tell me about your life now," Dr. Martinez said during their second session. Lily talked about the ranch, about learning to care for cattle, about Moonlight and the progress they'd made together, about George's patient teaching and how safe she felt, about the online school where she was actually catching up on credits, about her dreams of maybe working with animals someday. "And how do you feel about yourself now compared to 6 months ago?" Dr. Martinez asked. Lily thought about it. 6 months ago, I believed what they told me at the group home, that I was too much, too big, too difficult, too broken. I hated myself. Now I don't know. I still have hard days, but most of the time I think maybe I'm okay. Maybe I'm actually worth something. Dr. Martinez smiled. "That's significant growth, Lily. You should be proud of yourself." The evaluations came back positive. Dr. Martinez's report stated that Lily was adjusting well, forming healthy attachments and showing remarkable resilience. She recommended that Lily remain in George's care, but there was another hurdle: money. The state provided some support for foster children, but it wasn't much. George's ranch income was modest. He made enough for himself, but adding another person meant extra expenses. School supplies, clothes, medical care, food for a growing teenager, feed and care for Moonlight. George never complained about it, but Lily noticed. She saw him looking at bills with a worried expression. She saw him skip buying new boots even though his old ones had holes. She felt guilty, like she was a burden. "We need to find a way for this to be sustainable," Beth said during one of their planning meetings. "Not just emotionally sustainable, but financially too." That's when Lily had an idea. "What if the ranch made more money? What if we did something with Moonlight?" George looked up. "What do you mean?" "Well, Moonlight was a rescue, right? And I've been working with her, helping her heal. What if we did that officially? What if we became a rescue ranch for horses that have been abused or neglected? I could work with them, train them, help them become adoptable. People pay money for trained horses." Beth's eyes lit up. "That's actually brilliant. There's a real need for horse rescue operations. And Lily, you've shown real talent for working with traumatized animals." George looked thoughtful. "We'd need to expand the barn. Get proper facilities. It would take some investment up front." "I can help with that," Beth said. "I've got some savings. And we could apply for grants. There are organizations that fund animal rescue operations." Over the next few months, they worked to make it happen. Beth researched grants and helped George apply for nonprofit status. George used his connections in the ranching community to find contractors who'd work for reasonable rates. Lily threw herself into learning everything she could about horse training and rehabilitation. The local veterinarian, Dr. Patterson, heard about their plans and offered to help. "I'll provide medical care at cost," he said. "I've been wanting to see more rescue operations in this area. And Lily, if you're serious about this, I can teach you some basics of horse health care." Lily met with Dr. Patterson twice a week. She learned to recognize signs of illness, how to treat minor injuries, how to properly medicate horses. She absorbed everything like a sponge. This wasn't just something to do. This was becoming her passion. Word spread through the community about what they were doing. Neighbors stopped by with donations. "Ay vales," spare lumber, old tack that was still usable. The local feed store offered them a discount. People wanted to help. "This is what small towns do," George explained to Lily. "When someone's doing something good, everybody pitches in." 4 months after they started planning, the expanded barn was ready. They'd built 3 new stalls, a larger tack room, and a covered training area. It wasn't fancy, but it was functional. They officially registered as Second Chance Ranch and partnered with a horse rescue organization 2 counties over. Their first rescue horse arrived on a cold January morning. A gray gelding named Dusty, who'd been seized from a neglect case. He was underweight, his hooves overgrown, his coat matted and dull. But his eyes, though wary, held a spark of life. Lily approached him the same way she'd approached Moonlight. Slowly, patiently, with respect for his fear and trauma. George watched her work and felt pride swell in his chest. This girl who'd arrived on his doorstep broken and scared was now helping another broken, scared being heal. The transformation in Dusty took weeks, but it happened. With proper food, medical care, and Lily's gentle training, he began to trust again. His coat grew shiny. His weight normalized. He learned to respond to basic commands, and 3 months later, they found him a perfect forever home with a retired teacher who wanted a gentle companion horse. The adoption fee helped cover costs. More importantly, it proved their model worked. They took in another horse, then another. Lily worked with each one, documenting their progress, sharing their stories on a blog Beth helped her create. People started following their journey online. The blog became popular. Lily wrote honestly about her own journey alongside the horses' journeys. She didn't hide her past. She talked about bullying, about abuse, about how the ranch had saved her life. She talked about finding purpose in helping others heal. Messages started coming in, from other kids who'd been bullied, from people who'd experienced trauma, from folks who just needed to hear that healing was possible. Lily responded to every message, offering encouragement and hope. One day, a woman drove up from California with her teenage daughter. The girl had been through severe bullying at school and was struggling with depression. They'd read Lily's blog and wanted to visit the ranch. Lily showed them around. She introduced them to the horses, telling each rescue story. She talked about her own experiences without shame or embarrassment. Just honest truth about pain and healing. The teenage girl who'd been silent and withdrawn opened up for the first time. "Do you think I can get better?" she asked Lily. "Like really better?" Lily thought about where she'd been a year ago and where she was now. "Yeah," she said, "I do. It's not quick and it's not easy. But if you find the right place and the right people, healing can happen. You just have to keep showing up even when it's hard." After they left, George put his arm around Lily's shoulders. "You're making a real difference, kiddo. Not just with the horses. With people, too." That spring, they received a letter from the judge who'd handled Lily's case. She was approving the permanent guardianship arrangement. George was now officially Lily's guardian until she turned 18, with a clear path toward adoption if they both wanted it. They celebrated with a special dinner. Beth drove up. A few neighbors joined them. They ate and laughed and toasted to new beginnings. Lily looked around the table at these people who'd become her family and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Later, she walked out to the barn where Moonlight and 3 other rescue horses were settling in for the night. She stood in the doorway, breathing in the familiar smell of hay and horses, listening to the gentle sounds of animals at peace. A year ago, she'd been starving and desperate, knocking on a stranger's door with no hope left. 2 years had passed since that desperate knock on George's door. 2 years of healing, growing, and building a life that once seemed impossible. Now Lily stood in front of the mirror in her room, adjusting her graduation cap one more time. The blue gown hung awkwardly over her frame, but she didn't care. Today was special. She was graduating high school. Not just graduating, but graduating with honors, a year ahead of schedule, thanks to the online program she'd thrown herself into. The girl who'd been told she was stupid and worthless at the group home had proven them all wrong. "You ready?" George called from the hallway. Lily took one last look at herself. She'd changed so much in 2 years. Not just physically, though she was healthier and stronger now. But something in her eyes was different. The fear had been replaced with confidence. The shame had been replaced with pride. She knew who she was now. "Yeah," she called back. "I'm ready." The graduation ceremony was held at the community center in town. It was small, only about 30 students graduating from the online program. But the room was packed with family and friends. Lily scanned the crowd and found her people. George in his nicest button-up shirt, looking proud enough to burst. Beth and her husband who'd driven up from Denver. Dr. Patterson, who'd become a mentor. Sheriff Mike and his wife. Mrs. Rodriguez from the feed store. A whole community that had embraced her. When they called her name, Lily walked across the stage with her head held high. As she accepted her diploma, the room erupted in cheers. Not polite clapping, but genuine celebration. These people weren't here because they had to be. They were here because they wanted to celebrate her success. George was wiping his eyes when she returned to her seat. She grinned at him and mouthed, "Don't cry, old man." He laughed and wiped harder. After the ceremony, people swarmed her with hugs and congratulations. But the best moment came when a woman approached her nervously. She had a teenage daughter with her, maybe 13 or 14. "Lily, I'm Janet Miller. This is my daughter, Casey. We've been following your blog for 6 months now. Casey's been going through a really hard time with bullying at school. Your story gave her hope." Lily looked at Casey, who was staring at the ground, her shoulders hunched inward. She recognized that posture. That was the posture of someone trying to make themselves invisible. "Hey, Casey," Lily said gently. "Thanks for coming today." The girl looked up, her eyes red like she'd been crying recently. "I wanted to meet you. To see that it's really possible to get through this." Lily's heart ached. "It is possible. I promise. It doesn't feel like it when you're in the middle of it, but it is. You're stronger than you think. Can I hug you?" Casey asked suddenly, her voice breaking. "Of course." They hugged, and Lily felt the girl shake with quiet sobs. Over Casey's shoulder, Lily saw Janet mouthing thank you with tears in her eyes. In that moment, Lily understood something profound. Her pain hadn't been meaningless. By surviving it and sharing her story, she was helping others survive theirs. The celebration continued at the ranch. George had hung a banner that said, "Congratulations, graduate." Beth had ordered a cake from the best bakery in Denver. Neighbors brought food until the kitchen table was overflowing. It felt like a family reunion, even though most of these people weren't related by blood. As the sun began to set, Lily slipped away to the barn. She needed a quiet moment to process everything. The horses nickered in greeting as she entered. They had 5 rescues now, including Moonlight and Dusty. Each one had a story of pain and recovery. Each one had found safety here. Lily walked to Moonlight's stall. The mare immediately came to the door, nuzzling Lily's hands looking for treats. Lily laughed and produced an apple from her pocket. "Big day today, girl," Lily said, stroking Moonlight's neck. "I graduated. Can you believe it? 2 years ago, I didn't think I'd live to see this day. But here we are." Moonlight crunched her apple contentedly, and Lily rested her forehead against the horse's warm neck. "Thank you for helping me heal. For teaching me patience and trust. You'll never know how much you saved me." "She's not the only one who saved you." Lily turned to see George standing in the barn doorway, backlit by the golden sunset. She smiled. "No, she's not. You saved me too. You all did." George walked over and stood beside her, both of them watching Moonlight. "You know what's funny? I always thought I was the one doing the saving. But looking back, I think you saved me just as much. After Helen died, I was just going through the motions. Existing, not living. You reminded me what it feels like to have purpose, to have family." "We saved each other then," Lily said softly. "Yeah, I guess we did." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment before George spoke again. "So I got something for you." "A graduation present." He handed her an envelope. Lily opened it carefully and pulled out papers. "Legal papers." Her eyes scanned the words, not quite believing what she was reading. "Is this—" "Adoption papers," George confirmed. "If you want. You're 18 now, so legally you can make your own choices. But I'd like to officially adopt you, make you a real part of this family. No more guardianship or temporary arrangements. Just permanent. Forever." Lily's vision blurred with tears. "You want to adopt me? Really adopt me?" "I should have asked you first before filing the papers," George said, looking nervous now. "But yeah, I want you to be my daughter. Officially, if you want that too." "Want it?" Lily's voice cracked. "George, I've wanted that since the first week I was here. I just didn't think it was possible. I didn't think anyone would ever want me permanently. Well, I do. And Beth's excited to officially be your sister. She's already planning to embarrass you at family gatherings." Lily threw her arms around him, hugging him tight. Yes, I want you to adopt me. I want to be your daughter. I want this to be my real family." George hugged her back, and they both stood there crying happy tears in the barn, while the horses watched with patient understanding. The next few months were a whirlwind. The adoption process moved forward smoothly. Lily had also been accepted to Colorado State University's Animal Science program with a full scholarship. Between her grades, her essay about working with rescue horses, and the letters of recommendation from Dr. Patterson and others, the admissions committee had been impressed. But more exciting than college acceptance was another development. Second Chance Ranch had caught the attention of a nonprofit organization that funded animal rescue operations. They'd offered a grant to expand the facilities and create an educational program where at-risk youth could come work with the rescue horses as part of their own healing process. "It's perfect," Beth said when they were reviewing the grant proposal. "You can run the youth program, Lily. Share what you've learned. Help other kids the way George helped you." The idea both terrified and thrilled Lily. Could she really do this? Could she help other traumatized kids find healing through working with traumatized horses? The first group of kids arrived on a Saturday morning in June. 5 teenagers, all from difficult backgrounds. Foster care, group homes, abusive families. Lily saw herself in every single one of them. The distrust in their eyes, the walls they'd built around their hearts, the belief that they were unlovable and beyond help. "Hi, everyone," Lily said, standing in front of them in the barn. "My name's Lily. 2 years ago, I was exactly where you are now. I'd been bullied, hurt, and left to feel like I didn't matter. I ran away from a group home and ended up here. This ranch saved my life. These horses saved my life, and I'm hoping they can help you too." She told them her story, not a sanitized version, but the real raw truth. The bullying, the violence, the hunger, the desperation, the fear, but also the healing, the hope, the transformation. "I'm not going to lie to you," Lily said. "This work is hard. The horses will test you. They'll push your boundaries because they're scared too. They've been hurt too. But if you show up every day and do the work, something amazing happens. You start to heal. Both of you. Over the summer, she watched those 5 kids transform just like she had. The angry boy from foster care who didn't trust anyone slowly bonded with a skittish mare. The quiet girl who'd been abused learned to set boundaries with a pushy gelding. The kid who'd never succeeded at anything discovered they had a gift for horse training. By summer's end, all 5 kids had made progress. Not just with the horses, but with themselves, and they kept coming back. Even after the program ended, they'd show up on weekends to help with chores and spend time with the horses. One of them, a 16-year-old named Carlos, approached Lily after a session. "Thank you for this, for seeing us as worth the effort. Nobody else does. You are worth it," Lily said firmly. "Don't ever let anyone tell you different." As she watched him walk away, she felt George's hand on her shoulder. "You're really good at this, kid. You're making a real difference." "I learned from the best," Lily said, smiling up at him. Fall arrived, and with it came time for Lily to start college. She'd be commuting from the ranch, refusing to live in the dorms. She couldn't imagine being away from the horses, from George, from the home she'd built. Her first day of classes was intimidating. She was surrounded by students who'd had normal childhoods, supportive families, and straightforward paths to college. But Lily held her head high. Her path might have been harder, but it had made her stronger.